Good afternoon, and welcome to the Resolve to be Ready webinar series. My name is Allison Albright, and I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be available on the FEMA website in the coming weeks. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. In the top right corner, we ask if you'd like to receive news and updates from Region 2. If so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see a Q&A pod in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it using the download button. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the Region 2 Community Preparedness Officer to introduce our speakers and today's proceedings.
Thanks, Allison. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Debbie Costa, the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2. We are so pleased to be kicking off 2021 with a new webinar series called Resolve to be Ready. This series focuses on sharing emerging trends and resources from across the country. Each week, we are partnering with a different FEMA region to bring you these important topics. Each FEMA's regional, individual, and community preparedness program is joined together as one FEMA for a series of preparedness webinars for our stakeholders across the country to help you resolve to be ready in 2021. It's not too late to make those New Year's resolutions, and we hope that this year you will make preparedness one of your resolutions. Today's webinar is hosted by our team here in Region 2. The webinar will focus and discuss how to engage with your local community emergency response team, or CERT, to help respond to nearby disasters and emergency needs. You'll be hearing from the Federal Citizen Responder Lead, the President of the National CERT Association, and CERT Training Innovations from the University of Utah. We have three speakers today. Our first is Andy Burrows. Andy is the Citizen Responder Lead in the Partnership and Engagement Branch of FEMA's Individual and Community Preparedness Division. His program areas include CERT, Citizen Corps, and the You Are the Help Until Help Arrives program. Andy is a former logistics officer in the active duty United States Army. Other military experience includes logistics management positions at Army Sustainment Command, Rock Island Arsenal, Illinois, and positions in the 4th Infantry Division and 13th Sustainment Command as Company Commander, Operations Officer, Executive Officer, and Platoon Leader at Fort Hood, Texas. Andy deployed to Iraq for 27 months from 2005 to 2008. Our next speaker, Suva Tai, is the State Administrator for the CERT program in California and serves as the current President of the National CERT Association. Suva works for the California Office of Emergency Services and has 10 years of experience supporting volunteer programs and managing volunteers during disasters. Suva has deployed to 9 disasters and has worked internationally to develop CERT programs in China, Laos, and Chile. Our next two speakers, Rachel Brown is the National Hybrid Program Manager and has been involved with the Hybrid CERT program since 2018. She's a PhD candidate in environmental health with an emphasis on emergency planning and response, and over 20 years of experience in environmental management and safety. She manages several NIEHS grant projects, including hazardous material worker training, COVID-19 safety training, and community response trainings. James Ray has been involved since its inception with the development of hybrid CERT and disaster-built tools for CERT program use nationwide. He has been a community emergency response team member since 2011 with program management and instructor experiences. James has managed state-level CERT matters for 7 years in Utah and is an experienced instructor for G427 CERT Program Manager and G428 CERT Train the Trainer courses. James has spent the last 9 years with the Utah Division of Emergency Management promoting the Be Ready Utah campaign and spent 5 of those years as the state citizen corps coordinator promoting the whole community emergency management framework. So we have a great lineup for everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. I am going to pass the mic to Andy Burrows to get us started.
Thank you, Debbie, and thanks everyone for having me. Somebody remind me to pare that bio down just a little bit. So I would like to talk about how you can get involved with community emergency response teams, what the program is, and how you can find your nearest CERT, as well as some initiatives that the program is embarking on for 2021. So what is CERT? CERT is a federally sponsored, state-managed, and locally executed program for citizen responders to respond to emergencies and disasters in their community. The CERT program teaches individuals light search and rescue, disaster medical operations, and other basic skills that they can use, including fire suppression, in order to respond to emergencies and disasters in their communities. The program got its start in California in the 1980s because, as we know, our friends on the West Coast are always worried about the big one. And under those circumstances, in a big enough quake, a community could be on its own for potentially days or weeks while first responders are just overwhelmed. And so CERT emerged in Los Angeles and spread nationwide over the next few years, with FEMA adopting it federally in 1993. So presently we record around 2,300 CERT programs. Nationally speaking, since the 1980s, we estimate that FEMA and the states have trained over 600,000 volunteers to be trained for CERT, either as member of teams or having attended basic training and picked up some good skills for themselves and their families. So as you can see, that reiterates some of what I just said, but there are different facets of CERT, including campus CERT and CERT for teens, which is generally done in a high school environment. The picture on the right is a campus CERT in California. CERT is CERT. There's really no difference between a teen CERT and a normal CERT other than the environment that hosts it. A CERT program has to have a local government sponsoring organization. Or in the case of a campus CERT, it would be a college or university staff or administration or something like that. So FEMA provides the tools and rules for CERT training and program management, general guideposts, and maintains the basic national curriculum. What's done at the local level is the supervision of the training and then the supervision of CERT volunteers when they are deployed. And that deployment can be anything that the local sponsoring organization does. FEMA does not deploy CERTs, and FEMA does not track individuals who are trained locally. FEMA is just a sponsoring organization. The rubber meets the road, and all of the action with CERT happens at the state and local level. So some ways that CERT is involved outside of local sponsoring organization, CERT programs can coordinate with other NGOs or voluntary organizations active in disasters locally. Some of those connections are made at the federal level, but most of the time a local program or state will help interface between a CERT program's volunteers and other organizations. So an example of a local collaboration might be CERT volunteers working with the Red Cross for sheltering operations. An example of a national collaboration, 2 years ago, our office coordinated with the Red Cross for CERTs to participate in the Sound the Alarm campaign, installing smoke alarms in households that needed them around the country. So key challenges for CERT. A CERT program is really only as good as the sponsoring organization that runs it. In most places, volunteers are there, and volunteers have energy and want to be involved and make a difference in their communities. But the level of engagement and participation they get from sponsoring organizations can vary from place to place across the country. And the stronger the relationship between the sponsoring organization that would actually integrate CERT into activities is a key part of making CERT work. There are a lot of opportunities for CERT to respond and be a part of response and preparedness in their communities besides waiting for catastrophic disasters, which for most of the country don't normally happen. CERTs can participate in things like crowd and traffic control and have been doing that for COVID testing sites around the country. CERT can help with running local events. CERT can run preparedness events. CERT has a lot of potential roles participating in the fabric of communities that don't necessarily involve direct response to disasters. So, CERT supplemental materials, how can you get trained? First of all, you can find a rundown of CERT at ready.gov/CERT. That is where you would find most of the CERT training materials and an overview of the program. You can take courses in CERT. They're just introductory courses that give you a sense of what CERT is and what a volunteer can expect, what CERT does and does not do by visiting training.fema.gov. That's training.fema.gov. And take IS-317, Intro to CERT, or IS-315, which is CERT and the Incident Command System. The Intro to CERT course is for anybody and everybody who's interested in CERT. It's a good course, doesn't take very long. And then 315 is really oriented towards first responders, volunteer managers, CERT program managers. But again, anybody can take that course and get familiar with how CERT can actually integrate with the incident command system that first responders use around the country. Another way that CERT can participate in the national response framework is the national level exercise. In 2018, we actually published content for how local CERT programs could participate in a biannual exercise that FEMA does to test response nationwide. So that's a way that CERT programs can be involved in a national level. Some initiatives that CERT is currently going through, we are working on content to make CERT volunteers several positions within the national qualification system. The national qualification system is a uniform set of standards that first responders use in order to have standardized training and response capabilities in the event of disasters around the country. And so by quantifying certain skills that CERT volunteers can use and may have in training that they may have, then they would have a nationally recognized set of standards and national qualification system. That would be optional for CERT programs and volunteers. They do not have to do that, but it's an opportunity to really make the Community Emergency Response Team program part of the national response framework, part of the national conversation in disaster response. So that's a major project that we have ongoing right now that we are very excited about. If you want to find your local CERT program, you can either visit ready.gov/CERT and follow the links to find a CERT, or you can visit FEMA's preparedness community, which includes the CERT registration site, which is for program managers and sponsoring organizations. And by visiting community.fema.gov, you can click Find a CERT, and you can put in your zip code, and you'll get the nearest CERTs within 100 miles of your zip code, including a nice map feature that will show you exactly where they meet. So that's a nice feature that you can use to find your nearest CERT program. For CERT programs that may not maintain their listings as accurately as may like, you can also search social media and local websites to see if you can find them. But we are updating all of the CERT listings that we have nationwide, so the Find a CERT tool is definitely a way to look them up. So if you wish to contact my office, please reach out to FEMA-prepare at fema.dhs.gov, and we can answer any questions you may have about CERT. But generally speaking, most of the questions that we get to the inbox that aren't related to the website are really asking about local matters. The state and local level is really where the action happens with CERT. So if you want to get involved or you're currently part of a CERT program and you want to make the most of your experience in your program, it's that coordination and collaboration with the sponsoring organization and also your sponsoring organization coordinating with the state level that really makes the most of the program. So pending any questions, unless we're holding questions till the end, that concludes my briefing.
Andy, we will be holding all the questions till each of the presenters has a chance to speak. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Deb.
Subha, you're up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Debbie. Hi, my name is Subha Tai, and it looks like there's a good mix of current CERT members, CERT program managers, CERT instructors, as well as community members who are not already involved in CERT. So once you take the CERT training as a community member, and that's 20 hours of preparedness training, the next step is typically to be involved or stay involved with your CERT program. Many CERT programs do maintain a cadre of volunteers, and you do a lot of local community preparedness efforts as well as respond to disasters. FEMA's website, ready.gov/CERT, is great. You can download a lot of CERT materials, including the training curriculum, supplemental materials, information about liability coverage. But it's really hard for a lot of new CERT programs or even CERT programs that have been running for a long time to find information that's going to really help them customize their current CERT program or help them get to the next step in terms of utilizing their volunteers or working in disaster response. And the reason why that is because CERT programs being a part of the local agency and part of their jurisdiction and geographic region operate very differently from the other 2,300 CERT programs throughout the U.S. And it's going to be very hard for FEMA to create enough guidance to allow for all CERT programs to kind of get that tailored information. Now, all states or almost all states should have a state coordinator, and all FEMA regions have a liaison that's going to help new programs and offer them technical assistance. Unfortunately, just like in all of our lives, there's going to be turnover in positions. There's going to be people who are still learning their job. There's also going to be people who are not available because of vacations and deployments and everything. So there's sometimes a huge gap in terms of the availability of resources to really help a CERT program kind of answer questions or move on to the next step. And so that's why the National CERT Association was created. Think of the different associations that you've interacted with, like alumni associations for your college, or the Nurses Association or Teachers Association. Typically, these are bodies of individuals who are lobbying or working behind the scenes to really support that network and make sure there are resources available or kind of a lobby on their behalf for negotiations or for partnerships. And that's what the NCA is striving to do. Now, the first thing the NCA did, and the NCA started with a collection of CERT subject matter experts, state coordinators, program managers, who kind of just were sitting together and saying, hey, there's this gap in CERT. We would love to have more communication or resource sharing because all the CERT programs have developed their own activities or guidance documents or training materials, and it'd be great if we can kind of connect into that or find out who has what and share that information. So we work with FEMA, and that's going to be very important because we wanted to ensure that the NCA supported FEMA and CERT kind of the way CERT was intended and not to create things that FEMA didn't want CERT to do. So that was not the intent. So working with FEMA and the Andy Burrows as the National CERT lead and the then director of the FEMA ICPD division, we were able to get approval to create the NCA and work in partnership with FEMA. And here's a quote from Natalie Enclave that shows her excitement about the CERT program and the NCA program and what she thinks the NCA can do to support CERT. So I've already talked a little bit about why the NCA was created, but these are really the major things. Now, the last thing we can all kind of relate to, right? Projects that FEMA is unable or shouldn't do. I work for a government agency. There's a lot of projects that as a government agency we can't lead because of different rules and guidance of what government's role is. However, as an NCA member, and the NCA being a national nonprofit, then I can support projects that is kind of out of the realm of government, but still supporting these government programs and CERT programs. The mission statement for the NCA is very simple. The idea is to help communities be resilient by supporting CERT program growth and the creation of new CERT programs in areas. And we do that by promoting preparedness, response, recovery, and kind of supporting the assimilation of best practices and resources for CERT programs so that they can empower their volunteers in their communities. And our two main objectives is really, really simple. It's to enhance communication and also to share resources. And we'll go a little bit about how we go about doing that. So in terms of communication, because CERT is within the government infrastructure, and for those of you who are already in emergency management, it's very much like in the EOC within ICS. You have a chain of command and you talk to your next level in your chain of command and you don't go around that. And within CERT, that chain of command typically is going to be FEMA national headquarters, the FEMA regions, the state coordinators, the local programs, and then the volunteers. Which means that typically when there's information, the information flows within those channels. And it goes left to right and right to left. And it usually doesn't break those communication channels. The issue with that, though, is that at any given time, there could be a break in the link. And I've shown a couple of examples. There are a couple of states right now that don't have a coordinator because their state eliminated that position, or the person that was in that position left or retired and they haven't refilled that position, right? If you're in government right now, you know that there's oftentimes when someone leaves a position, they just no longer fill it. They consider that a budget recoup, and they just say, hey, we just don't have the money to fill that position, and they kind of juggle those responsibilities amongst other people who are currently working. Unfortunately, CERT coordination is an ancillary position for a lot of emergency managers at the state and local level. So when that is spread along with other duties to multiple employees, a lot of times that just gets left behind. And a lot of times that is the forgotten child and there's no coordination for the CERT program. Also because a lot of CERT program managers at the state and local level are emergency managers or first responder personnel. They could be deployed to a disaster, which means that they're going to miss communication. And if they miss communication and can't forward it, everyone in their downline is missing that communication. So that's currently the issue with communication for CERT. Now, in some states, it works really well because they've had the same people in the FEMA region, the same people in the state region for a long time, and these people are really passionate about CERT. Unfortunately, we are all very different in what we're passionate about. There are some job duties in my workload that I'm not passionate about, and I do the minimum possible. Right? I'm very passionate about CERT, so I do more than what I've been assigned. But that's not always going to be the case for everybody. So the way the NCA is trying to alleviate this is instead of having a big chain of communication, the NCA is going to have direct communication, which means that when you join the National CERT Association, whether you join as a program manager, as an instructor, as a general volunteer, as a state coordinator, when there's information that the NCA receives, then the NCA will disseminate it directly to those bodies directly. So program managers can get information directly without having to wait for their state coordinator or the FEMA region to pass that information down. And that's going to be very key because there's so much information out there. And sometimes you just can't subscribe to 10 different email channels and visit 10 different websites. But the NCA will consolidate information and send information in a timely manner as soon as they receive it or whenever it's relevant, along with several reminders. And that's the great thing about the communication flow for the NCA. In terms of organization, it operates very similar to a very successful CERT program. So if you join a CERT program, and it's a program that's very robust, you'll notice that typically there's one person assigned from the sponsoring agency to oversee the CERT program and trying to be the main point of contact and the main driver for the direction that that CERT program goes. However, the people who actually are the structure of the CERT program that helps with coordinating classes and helps to lead a lot of preparedness events are going to be volunteers from the community, people who have taken the CERT training and have stayed on and are dedicating a lot of their time to help with coordinating the training for outreach and preparedness activities, and even to lead a lot of the disaster response. Many successful CERT programs will have a body of between 7 and 10 CERT leaders who are all volunteers to help run multiple facets of the CERT program. And that's what the NCA is. The NCA does not pay any of the members to do any of the work. All the NCA members do work pro bono. A lot of the leadership is going to be people who are, like me, state coordinators or local program managers and instructors who have been seen as leaders in the CERT world in their areas, right, helping to guide the NCA and to also make sure that any projects that the NCA embarks upon is going to be in line with what the scope of CERT is, within the FEMA scope and within the general scope of CERT. Then there's a working group. These are going to be general members of the NCA who are program managers, instructors, state coordinators, volunteers, who are doing a lot of the work with tracking resources, doing webinar training, consolidating communication. And the last group is going to be members, right? These are stakeholders, people who are part of programs, people who are community members, people who are program managers, who are going to benefit from the work that the NCA does and the communication that the NCA facilitates. Anyone can join the NCA. The idea was going to be if you are part of the CERT program or support the CERT program, you can join the NCA to get that communication, to get access to resources. But then also by joining the NCA, you're really helping the NCA because, you know, as with anything, numbers matter. And when the NCA says that they can represent hundreds of programs and thousands of programs, we work with organizations, we work with partners. It's going to give us a lot more leverage to gain more benefits for the NCA, but also to open a lot of doors for partnerships at the local level, state level, and national level. The NCA does have an annual MOU with FEMA, and that dictates our partnership and what we're able to do and not able to do, but it also recognizes us as an official association that supports the CERT program. I see my time is running down, so I'm just going to run to the very end. NCA has a partnership with ProPack, which is a seller of personal protective equipment and CERT equipment and supplies. And the NCA has leveraged our partnership to give a 5% to anyone purchasing CERT and MRC materials, as mentioned in NCA. And lastly, I just want to mention that you can visit our website at nationalcert.org for more information. And I apologize for running out of time, but you can check our slides, and you can email us at info@nationalcert.org for more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Suva. And there is a download pod on the screen, so everyone is able to download a PDF of today's presentation, which has all the links and all the notes that our speakers are sharing with us today. So our next presentation is going to be from James Ray and Rachel Brown.
Thank you, Deborah. This is Rachel Brown, and thank you for the intro. Like you mentioned, I'm the Hybrid CERT Training National Program CERT Manager at the University of Utah Rocky Mountain Center for Occupational Environmental Health. Information on our program can be found at onlinecert.org. We have partnered with James Ray. He is our subject matter expert at the State of Utah Division of Emergency Management. And the program is grant sponsored through the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, T2R Consortium, our developer 360 Immersive, and Merit for our digital credentials. We have also partnered with the National CERT Association with SUVA and Listos, California, and Caloia. So FEMA depends on state coordinators to supervise volunteers and their training at all times. Objectives are met. The course and acceptance of the hybrid training is at the discretion of the state, territory, and CERT coordinators. This is the FEMA Hybrid CERT Training Guidance. Here's a brief history of the program. It was originally developed back in May of 2017. FEMA reviewed and fully supports the program back in March. We attended and presented at the National CERT Association conference, and they reviewed and approved the program back in May. We partnered with Merit for our digital credentials, in March last year. The course was updated with the FEMA 2019 curriculum back in April, and we partnered with CalRS and LISTOs to add additional features such as triage, additional ABA components, and translation into Mandarin that should be available early this year. Our nationwide rollout was September 22nd of last year. Here's a list of our approved states so far. If you do not see your state listed, please have your state CERT coordinator approve by emailing Suva over at info@nationalcert.org. Any additional information can be also found on our website at onlinecert.org. So the hybrid CERT is comprehensive to the FEMA 2019 CERT curriculum. It's 12 hours online and 16 hours in person for the hands-on skills portion. For your students to complete the course, they sign up with their local hybrid CERT program, access and complete the online course, and then email their digital certificate to their program manager and then pass off their skills and receive their final certificate. So some of the program benefits: it reduces program load down from 30 hours to 16. It promotes a standardized course delivery. Students complete at their own pace and convenience. More publicly available for rural areas or even internationally. It provides a way for students to make up a missed unit. It's a great refresher tool and great option for workplace and school-based CERT programs. So I am going to turn the time over to James. Oh, go ahead.
Yep, this is James Ray, and the hybrid CERT training is a great opportunity, obviously, for those who have never taken the CERT training, but it's also a great opportunity for those program managers and instructors to be able to kind of help them with administering the CERT training locally. As Rachel said, the basis of this is that the entire lecture portion has now been automated into an online learning experience. The rest of the training is then, or what's left over of the training is the hands-on practical portion of the training. And that portion is then administered by the local CERT program, and all of the tools and resources that programs need to administer that are provided at onlinecert.org. But the place where students can go and start taking the training is also there as well. What we've been learning with this, some of the concerns that people have voiced is that there might be a learning gap between taking the online learning experience and then coming to class and doing the hands-on portion. What's interesting though is with all the beta tests and the experiences that we've been having, that learning gap doesn't exist, or it's small. But obviously, the sooner or the shorter that gap between the two experiences, the better, because as we all are, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. But with the structure of that hands-on experience is not only a great refresher, but then also makes sure that each student has that adequate experience, be able to really try out each of these skill sets and to make sure that you understand them well. The other concern was, do we form as a team within the 16 hours of that classroom experience? And the answer is yes. In fact, we've been finding with this hybrid approach that in many instances that team has formed even better. And that's because the experience is no longer death by PowerPoint in a classroom environment, but rather that 16 hours is fully energized with hands-on experience after hands-on experience. There's no more boring PowerPoints associated with it. And the energy in the classroom seems to be so much higher. In regards to that, we have also found that the depth of student learning has been greater than in the traditional format. And there's several reasons for that, right? The instructors The instruction is the same, nationwide delivered, but the student can now learn at their pace, at their convenience. And the structure of the online learning environment, which I'll show you, is built in a way where you can't just skip through. You have to be engaged through the entire process, which really sets learning a lot deeper. What does course completion look like? There's the certificate that you get after you've completed the entire online learning experience. And then after you've come to the classroom learning experience where you do all the skill sets, you, in essence, fulfill this middle one where there's this CERT skills checklist. As soon as all those skills checklists are completed, then you combine those together, and that equals proof of completion, and then your local CERT program can issue an official CERT certificate of course completion. So you get the one from online after you've completed all the modules with that online lecture format, and then you complete all the skill sets, you get that completed, and then both of those together combined equal proof of completion. So, and again, your local CERT program is ultimately responsible for issuing the official certificate of course completion. And all the tools are there for that. And you can see that. The image in the middle is hyperlinked, so if you download the slide deck, you can actually click on that and actually see what that classroom portion would look like. What are all the skill sets that are left over that you need to go through? Next, I actually want to show you the website. So if Allison, if you can pull up the screen sharing thing, I'll share my screen. If you go to onlinecert.org, and I'll show you this here in a moment. All right, just to double check, can you see my screen okay?
Right now we see a black box. Yep, there, it just popped up.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so up in the URL, obviously if you do onlinecert.org, it always will redirect to the most current site, and this is that website. You'll notice that on the sidebar are the various buttons to go to your audience-specific information. So for students, if students go to the student tab, they can see the link to the online learning course, both in English as well as Spanish. And as Rachel said, and Suva is working on with California, there will be a Mandarin version available coming soon as well. So students can go there. Now, generally how this happens is the local CERT program will schedule a time when they're going to do the training. And typically they schedule, when they're going to do the hands-on portion. But when they advertise to the local community, the advertisement would then say, hey, please register with us first so that we know that you're interested in doing this. And then once you register with us, then we can communicate with you and you can start that online learning experience. Because if students take the training without the program manager locally knowing about it, then the program manager has no way of knowing if you are actually taking the training. So it's better to register with your local program first. Once you've registered, they say, go ahead, go take the online experience. The students come here, they would click on this and then go through their own registration system for the online learning experience, where you would then register for that and then start those modules, complete all of those modules. And once you have completed all the modules, the system will automate a final certificate of course completion. And then you can use that, the students can use that as proof that they have completed the online learning experience. I'll talk about this later on, but each module can also issue a certificate of completion per module, so that if you as a student need to only simply make up a one unit, then you can, and you can issue a certificate of proof that you've completed that specific module. So for program managers, if program managers go to this tab, the program managers will see the program guide. And that program guide is your primary source to kind of start this process to get things going. In conjunction with that is the entire toolkit for the program managers and instructors to use to say, hey, what do you need to then successfully complete that hands-on, in-person classroom learning experience with all the leftover stuff, after the students have completed their online learning experience. And everything that you need is inside of that toolkit for the programs to successfully administer that. In conjunction with that, oftentimes there's questions like, how do I do this? How do I do that? We were able to successfully do some recordings, and those recordings were then put onto YouTube with all that information of how to administratively make that happen. So if you go to that link, you'll see a YouTube channel, and on that YouTube channel is this playlist with all of those. And just go through all 3 of those experiences. Watch those, and hopefully that should answer all of your questions. But even if afterwards there's remaining questions, you can get a hold of us through info at online CERT. Once you're done with that, program managers and instructors can get a certificate showing that they've completed this hybrid CERT training guidance. And that little post-test right there with that link can be the way that you can go get that certificate, that you know how to now administer this hybrid CERT experience. So that's a couple of resources that are there. Also, there's feedback for program managers and students. We want to hear your feedback. We want to make sure that this remains effective, that it answers your questions, that you have all the tools and resources that you need to be successful. So with that, let's go back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let's go back to the presentation. The next one, I just showed you this. So the hybrid CERT administrative training, that's right there on the website, as I showed you. Again, that's everything that you need. Hopefully all the questions are answered through that training on how to administer. All the best practices are being shared. And then that certificate is available to you. This flyer is not necessarily a public-facing flyer. What I mean by that is this particular flyer is a program-facing flyer. This is something that local states can use to, and regions, FEMA regions can use to inform the state partners as well as the local CERT program managers that, hey, this tool exists. And this flyer can be shared with those programs to say, hey, here's the program guide, here's how this works. It gives them access to all of those tools necessary in a flyer format. And that's also available in Spanish as well. This online learning experience, when the student goes online, they start, they register online, they start each of those modules and they go through that. This online learning experience has these components in there. There's a voiceover as well as transcription. So you can not only hear as well as see what the virtual instructor is talking about. The system saves your progress. So if you have to leave, you can exit out and then come back and it starts right up where you left off. Also, throughout each module, there are interactive knowledge checks as well as videos to kind of help you make sure that you're understanding various things. At the end of every unit, there is an end-of-unit quiz. And then once you've completed all 8 modules, then in Module 9 is the final exam. So for program managers, they don't have to issue the final exam in a classroom environment. That exam has now been satisfied in the online learning experience. That way, program managers can simply focus on all of the hands-on experiences. The participant manual is available electronically through this learning system, so you can kind of follow along as you're learning side by side on what is being said inside the participant manual. You can't just skip forward, like just rush forward to the end, complete it kind of thing. It is gated so that each slide kind of has a time sequence to it, and it kind of requires you to remain engaged, which really helps with that learning. You can interface with this training via your mobile device, a tablet, as well as the desktop. Any of those devices can interface with it. So there's been experiences where I've been in transit on the bus, right, going to work, and I'm taking the training on my phone while I'm going. That's totally an option for you. Inside of this training are also some virtual reality simulations where you can operate it either with your smart device, or you can operate it with a mouse on your computer or desktop. And those are kind of fun. And then there's some live IT for any course questions, kind of help you along the process. This is what that live IT looks like. There's kind of this thing called HubBot, and there's a team behind that that's there to kind of help answer all of the various questions that you may have throughout your experience. This is some of the virtual reality experiences. There's one for triage that'll be coming with a triage module. This one with the earthquake virtual reality simulation, trying to get people to experience that scene awareness, right, where you're looking around you and making sure that you're understanding exactly what's going on and identifying those various hazards so you can respond to those appropriately. These are also available on an application outside of the training itself, so you can download this app and be able to experience many of these virtual reality experiences. The digital merits, I want to kind of show you this really quickly. So let's go online onto the website. If Allison, if you can bring up the screen sharing once more. And I'll show you these merits. Once you take the online learning experience, each module will automate a merit that you have completed a unit. You don't have to sign up for it. It's just kind of automatically embedded into the system. So if you get an email saying, hey, you got a new merit for completing that unit, don't be alarmed. That's on purpose, and that's to empower you with all the information that you need to prove that, hey, you've completed these various units. But for program managers as well, this allows program managers to be able to look up a student by name. This requires the program manager knows who their students are. So if I look up Rachel Brown, and I can see as a program manager what Rachel Brown has completed. So hopefully you can see that. Yes, she's completed modules 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and she also completed the capstone with Unit 9. And so I, as a program manager, have now two forms of a way, these are tools, of a way to help me know as a program manager how my students are doing, how far they're progressing, but also another way of proof of completion, right? If, let's say, the student for some reason had a hard time getting that official online certificate experience out and to you as a program manager, then you could also go here and see that and know that it's all completed that way as well. So those are a couple of tools for you so that I'll stop sharing that, and let's go back to the slide deck. Right, and advance the next slide. So Merits has been a great partner with that, making those digital credentials available. Within the training, the hazard annexes are built into there. So students can engage in some of those various hazard annexes as well. So that's a great addition to the training. And then, as we said before, if you know, historically, CERT training used to be a part of the curriculum, but recently it was taken out and left up to the local jurisdictions of how they want to deliver that triage concept. But even with that in place, there's been a lot of people that have been saying, hey, we would like at least something, right? So California has been working on developing a triage unit that takes all of the new curriculum in hand and all updated information. And they are really close to completion on that. And then that will be made available inside of the online learning experience as well. That will be optional, though. You may not be required to unless your local jurisdiction says, hey, we really want you to take that. That would be definitely an optional unit. With that, I hope that you all get an opportunity to take this online learning experience, but do, again, make sure that you follow up with your local program manager to let them know that you want to complete that online CERT training. And if program managers and instructors have any further questions about how to administer this after they have done those trainings and explored all of the tools and resources, they are welcome to contact us at onlinecert@utah.edu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. We do have some questions for our speakers that run the full gamut. So, Andy, I'll let you answer this one, but it's from a FEMA reservist who's asking, what happens is that, if I'm a member of a CERT team and I'm deployed, am I able to assist in the local area? How would it work? Would be allowed to do both duties at one time?
Well, so I wouldn't even want to touch that question from an HR perspective. I would say that, as employees I know can volunteer as they see fit, as time allows. So I don't know any sort, I wouldn't even want to try to answer from any other perspective of leave or anything remotely like that, or comp time. I won't touch that one, don't know. But if the schedule allowed and a volunteer wanted to, or an FEMA employee wants to reach out and work with a CERT program in their area, they, to best of my knowledge, are always free to do so if the program is looking for volunteers.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do you happen to know generally, and this is probably for you, but do CERT volunteers require any sort of liability protection? I don't know if maybe Suva wants to answer that.
So from our perspective, we publish a CERT liability guide that has some general answers to those questions. They talk about liability and being a good Samaritan and that sort of thing. But generally questions of insurance and liability are handled at the state and local level. And yes, Suva may be able to offer some good tips on that front.
Suva, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, for liability, if you're a CERT program and you are training volunteers or asking volunteers to do anything, you're going to be liable. Just like if your boss tells you to do something and you get injured, you're going to look to your boss to kind of recoup those costs. A lot of programs will either purchase liability coverage. Sometimes a sponsor agency will offer liability coverage for their volunteers. In the state of California, we have a liability coverage that all government-affiliated CERT programs can utilize to cover their volunteers during training as well as disaster response. And some programs that don't have the liability coverage will opt to use a waiver for their participants when they're taking training or when they're deployed to disasters. Like Andy said, there is a liability guide that will give you an overview of what that looks like, as well as tips on how to reduce liability, which includes training, includes procedures. I believe that guide is no longer on the current website, but if you email us at info@nationalcert.org, I will send you a link to access that guide.
Thank you both. If CERT becomes part of the national process, does that mean federal money would be allocated for the CERT program? I believe he's referring to, I would imagine, Andy, what you were talking about with the FQS system.
Sure. So I guess there's a couple of answers to that question. The first being that federal money can and does make its way to CERTs, but that is really, really, really up to the states. There are a variety of funding mechanisms that FEMA and the federal government, Homeland Security, use to get money to the states that is sometimes moved towards citizen responder initiatives. For anybody on the call who remembers maybe 2011 and prior, there were actually requirements that state moved Homeland Security grant program money and other portions of funds directly to CERT and Citizen Corps or programs that amounted to the same thing. At the behest of the states 10 years ago, that requirement was removed. That said, states can still and do still move those same monies to citizen responder type initiatives, but they are no longer required to as part of the grant. So that's the first part. So if a CERT program or a city or state wants to fund it, they absolutely 100% can, and they can do so with federal monies. It's just it's at that level, not the federal level, and it's not a federal requirement anymore. Insofar as funding directly, I don't see that becoming something that happens for the foreseeable future, any sort of money going directly from FEMA to CERT or CERT programs. Obviously, FEMA funds my portion of our program office, but relatively speaking, that's not a whole lot of funding. But I don't foresee in the foreseeable future funds going directly to CERT programs without having been filtered through the states. And then insofar as national qualification system, again, that's a uniform set of standards that is in a centralized federal repository. The program, the web program is called One Responder, but all of those documents that are part of the national qualification system do and have for a long time lived in something called the resource typing library tool. So any first responders on the call are probably familiar with that, and that's where you can find your 509s, your position task books, and job titles and descriptions and so forth for your positions as part of NQS.
Thank you, Andy. I know we're running a little short on time. If our speakers and our listeners wouldn't mind hanging on an extra 5 minutes, I think we can get through all these questions very quickly. Is there a suggestion on how a CERT program can control access to the online courses?
Yeah, this is James Ray. I'll answer that. As I was talking in the presentation, the suggestion is that all program marketing says to their local constituents, hey, please register with us locally first. Meaning us is the local program that within your city, they would set up their own registration portal to collect the individual's name, phone number, email, whatnot, so that they can stay in contact with their own students. Now, let's say somebody does find this and they do go online and they just take the training. There is a prompt within there that says, hey, now that you're done with this, it is important that you contact your local CERT program manager to complete the hands-on portion. And so that is also an option.
Okay. I think we need some clarification. The next question, the listener is saying, that they took CERT training 3 years ago and they've taken FEMA courses online, but to be recertified in CERT, they would need to take the training that James talked about today. what would be the best way for them to go about?
Deb, I think I can bounce on that one, and then James can fill in his thoughts from the hybrid perspective, which is if a volunteer took a CERT basic course with a certain sponsoring organization, then that sponsoring organization is kind of the one who issued the certificate or credential. You probably noticed that your certificate didn't say anything about FEMA or DHS, or at least if it did, it should not have. That would have been the city of wherever. So if you move to another city, then it is at the discretion of the new city to accept that basic training or not. Why, might you ask? Well, the new sponsoring organization are the ones who would supervise and be responsible for the CERT volunteers and their actions in the event of a deployment or in the event of community service or what have you. So that's why it would be at the discretion of the new sponsoring organization if they wanted you to retrain or recertify or audit their CERT basic course to make sure that they were satisfied with everything. So it's not something that FEMA is going to weigh in on, other than to say that CERT sponsoring organizations supervise CERT training and activity.
All right, I think some of that answers in part the next question when you mentioned contacting the local program manager. Do you mean the state manager? I'm going to go ahead and say no, that it would be local. And can you be certified by a neighboring state if you are not closer to that state than your state contact? So I guess if you live in South Jersey but you're closer to Philadelphia and you want to be on that CERT team, you would contact.
You'd be free to participate in the program that you chose and cross the river into Philadelphia, and yeah, that would be trained with and deployed by them. I don't think that the jurisdiction you lived in would have, you're free to cross into Philadelphia.
Yeah, my understanding is that you're free to join the team that you choose. I mean, a lot of them, I see people and I talk to people all the time that maybe live in one town, but, maybe the program isn't as robust as it is in another town, or they're on the border. So it's really not delineated typically by anybody, by the federal, the state, or the local. Usually the voluntary, the CERT teams are happy to have, volunteers from all around.
Sure. Ideally, a CERT, you are a member of a CERT in the community in which you live. That could be as micro a level down to your neighborhood, so that if something happens, you can, check on your family, check on your neighbors, and walk out the door in the green shirt. But if that doesn't exist, or you have some other interest that you'd like to serve in an adjacent community, you'd be absolutely free to do so.
Okay. We had a question about the membership fee. I'm assuming that this goes to Suva, asking whether or not it's typically paid by individuals or by the sponsoring agency. And Suva, I'd like to also add to that question, do you recommend that the team leads and the program managers are the ones to join the NCA, or should every CERT member look to become part of the NCA?
Sure. Thank you, Debbie. It really depends on what your needs are. I think that as long as one person from your program is part of the NCA, that person will benefit from the direct communication and access to the resources, and then they can share freely with anyone within their network. So your program manager can say, oh, I want the CERT liability guide. They access the document and they say, okay, I'm going to share this now with my CERT leadership. If you're a CERT team leader and you're not getting that quick response or quick information from your program manager, or your program manager is very busy, and you say, hey, I'm a team leader, I want to be able to keep an eye on what's happening in CERT and inform my program manager to benefit my program. Then as a team member, you can join the NCA to get information and to share that and keep appraised of what's going on in CERT. In terms of paying for membership, I have seen several programs who are paying for their CERT members. I've seen people paying on their own. And the reason why there is a requirement to join the NCA in the first place is because, once again, if you don't join the NCA, you're subject to the normal communication channel. As part of the NCA or even as a California CERT person, I'm not really supposed to be reaching out or talking or communicating or sharing resources with programs in Florida, programs in Chicago, or instructors in any other state, because those belong to those states in the chain of command. However, by joining the NCA, you're basically opting in into almost like a loophole, which allows us to communicate with you directly as a NCA member. The reason why there's a cost to the NCA is because there's a cost for a technology platform that we utilize to manage our members, as well as there's a cost for incorporation and everything. So by joining, part of your fees goes to support some of those costs, and any leftover dollars will be used to support CERT training and CERT programs. The biggest thing is going to be national CERT conferences. So, a little percentage goes into the bucket so that we can plan and execute conferences going forward. And our first conference will be in 2022, because in 2021, Missouri is hosting the national conference.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll make this our last question. How can we encourage CERT team creation for areas that are hard to access, low income, and typically underserved? And I would add to that, in general, how do I start a CERT team in my town if I don't already have one?
Andy, do you want to get that? Do you want me to cover that?
Suva, I think it might be useful if you covered that one. I think you know my answer. Maybe you'll have a different take that you can add.
Sure. So generally, to start a CERT program, there's kind of two methods. One is going to be top-down. Top-down meaning that there's a sponsor agency like a fire department or police department or emergency services that says, hey, we have a requirement or a duty to train our community members for disaster preparedness or disaster response. And they're going to say, okay, we're going to start a CERT program, and then that's easy because they will have the funding, they'll have the instructors, and they can push it out. And the hard part is going to be getting people interested in taking the training. You'll see that oftentimes post-disaster, a lot of local government is going to say, we need something so that our citizens can be prepared, and that's when you'll see a lot of creation of the CERT program. The bottom-up approach is going to be if you're an individual that says, hey, there's no CERT training around me. Why is there no CERT training? I just saw on the news that there was a disaster somewhere in my state, and I think that could happen to us too. And so that is going to be the catalyst for starting a CERT program. However, the hard part is going to be getting buy-in because a CERT program requires a sponsoring agency. 99% of the time, that is a public safety office. In that case, the best path is going to be either approaching a fire department or a police department or approaching your city council, right? Going to a city council meeting and raising your hand and saying, hey, what are we doing about disaster preparedness? Because your city council is going to have the power if they feel like, yes, that is a big concern, we want to address it. They have the power to kind of put in ordinance or put in regulations or legislation that says, hey, we need to have a CERT program, and then they can designate a public safety agency to start a CERT program. So we see that happening quite often as well. Beyond that, there's really no other way to start an official CERT program. Now, the training materials are online, so you can download the materials and read it on yourself. You can take the hybrid CERT training to get the lecture portion. FEMA has a great introduction to CERT training, which is 2 hours long, which will give you an idea of the scope of CERT. There's also some great training called You Are to Help Until Help Arrives, and other trainings that you can just prepare yourself, and you can even be good enough at it to train your neighbors and your family and friends. So you don't have to have a full-blown 20-hour CERT program. You're going to have a small program training people in 2 to 3 hours of disaster preparedness. Beyond that, if you email us at info@nationalcert.org and have questions, I'm happy to provide you with some direction on where to go or some tips on how to get started and how to get better prepared.
Thanks, Suva. And I would just add to that that I do not belong to a CERT team, but I have taken the CERT training. Being part of the federal family, we're required to take a lot of training. It is, without a doubt, the best training I've ever had, and I wish every American had an opportunity to take the CERT training. So with that, I am going to thank our speakers today and thank everyone who participated in today's call. I apologize for going 10 minutes over, but I thought it was important that we have an opportunity to answer all of the questions. There's a very short 3-question poll on the screen. If folks wouldn't mind filling that out, it does help us determine future programming. And there are clickable links on the screen to our upcoming webinars, our past webinars. If you're not already getting FEMA Region 2 news, you can subscribe. Thank you, everyone. You're free to drop. Have a great day.